This is the Station for Negotiation podcast, episode number 54. My name is Gene Killian. I've been a lawyer and professional negotiator for 40 years. The last two episodes on the podcast, we talked about some pretty heavy negotiations, and today we're going to lighten it up a little bit. We're going to go into the world of sports. Every once in a while, we talk about sports negotiations of sports contracts. And one of the reasons for that is because there's a lot of public reporting when a big time athletic coach or player negotiates a contract. So we've done a few of those here. Today, I want to talk to you about an American football coach named John Harbaugh and his recent negotiations with the New York Giants football team to become their new head coach. And as we go through the negotiation, which was reported in The Athletic, I would like you to think about three questions. First of all, when you really want to get a deal done, how much is too much when you're expressing interest in doing business with the other side? In other words, you want to express interest, but you may be thinking, if I seem too anxious, the other side's going to take advantage of me. So that's one thing I want you to think about as we go through this. The second thing is something that we've been emphasizing a lot lately, which is the importance of developing rapport with your negotiation partner and using patience to develop that rapport. In this story, one of the essential tools in developing rapport will be chocolate chip cookies. You'll hear about that in a bit. And the third thing is something I heard a speaker once say that stuck in my mind. In any negotiation, remember this: bank in the bank, not in your head. Bank in the bank, not in your head. And that means you don't have a deal closed until it's closed, period. So until it's closed, don't start calculating the benefits you're going to get from the deal. So now a little bit about this. John Harbaugh is from a famous football family. His dad, Jack Harbaugh, was a successful college football coach. His younger brother, Jim, is a excellent and controversial American football coach who won the national championship of college football with the University of Michigan Wolverines a couple of years ago, although when he did it, it was kind of enshrouded in controversy because there were all sorts of allegations of cheating. And Jim tends to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but he's now the coach of the Chargers. Jim is a very successful coach, as I said. He has taken a professional football team, the San Francisco 49ers, to the Super Bowl, where he was defeated by John Harbaugh, who at the time was the coach of the Baltimore Ravens. So John Harbaugh was the coach of the Baltimore Ravens football team, as I just said. He was there for 18 years. He was very successful, but I think it got to the point where things were getting a little stale, and ownership just decided they wanted to go in a new direction. And when he was fired by the Ravens a few weeks ago, as I'm recording this, he became one of the hottest coaching commodities on the market. Now, the New York Giants have been terrible for years. They are a once proud franchise that has won 4 Super Bowls, and they are one of the oldest franchises in the National Football League. They're owned by the Mara family, M-A-R-A. If you're a fan of the actress Kate Mara, she's part of that family, although I don't think she's part of ownership, but she's part of the family. And currently, the member of the Mara family who is the owner at the Giants is John Mara, who has been going through a very difficult time. John has had cancer. He's an equal partner with the team. It's been difficult. He's been in chemotherapy. So during these negotiations, John has been having health problems. That's important to remember. The other part owner of the Giants is a guy named Steve Tisch. Unfortunately, Steve Tisch's name has come up as I'm recording this in the Epstein files, which isn't great. That happened after these negotiations took place. It's interesting to think about whether, had that association between Tisch and Epstein been known before these contract negotiations took place, whether they would have any effect on the negotiations themselves. In any event, the Giants were good. They won a bunch of Super Bowls back in the day, but for the past 10 years, it's been pretty bad. They've run through a series of coaches, and they've just been pretty awful. Last year was particularly terrible. So they've been looking for a really good coach to try to drag them out of this morass. And actually, they were looking at John Harbaugh before he was even fired by Baltimore, because they had heard rumors that Harbaugh was going to be fired, and they started to prepare their pitch to him before he was ever let go. I'm going to work today from an article by Ian O'Connor in the January 19, 2026 issue of The Athletic called The Inside Story of the Giants' John Harbaugh Deal and the Talks That Saved It. And I gave you some things to look at as we go through this, but one overriding thing to think about is how you can use a personal connection to get a deal done, how to develop a personal connection to get a deal done. And that runs through this entire discussion. So without further ado, let me go to this article. We're going to read a little bit of it. And by the way, if you're interested in the negotiation of sports contracts, there is no better periodical to subscribe to than The Athletic. They really get into the nuts and bolts of sports deals, both when athletes or coaches are signed or business deals between equipment providers and teams. Very, very good reporting, and this is no exception. Ian O'Connor wrote a great article. So let me go to this article and let's break it down. And here's what it says. John Harbaugh loves his F-150, so he was planning to drive that pickup 190 miles north for his sit-down with the New York Giants. He was going to spend that time alone with his football thoughts, practicing in solitude what he would say on one of the biggest job interviews of his life. Let me take a step back. So from the first paragraph, as I look at this, it seems that John Harbaugh is as interested in the Giants as the Giants are interested in John Harbaugh. And in fact, he had discussions with his father about the fact that this job was opening up. And his father basically told him, if you don't take that job, you're nuts. So there's interest both ways here. Let's see how it plays out. Back to the article. The Giants had another idea. They offered up the Gulfstream G500 owned by Steve Tisch, John Mara's equal partner atop the organizational flowchart. The private jet would provide a quicker, less stressful journey from Baltimore, and it would give Harbaugh a chance to meet another passenger, Giants general manager Joe Schoen, before a marathon Wednesday inside the team's New Jersey facility. Now, stepping back from the article here, normally in American sports, the coach of a National Football League team works for the general manager. In other words, the general manager is his boss. One of the things you're going to see in this negotiation is that Harbaugh wants to change that. He wants to report directly to the owner, so over his nominal boss's head. And that becomes a little bit of an issue because the Giants are a very old, very traditional football organization. And you're going to see it takes John Mara, the man who is suffering from cancer, his open-mindedness to this type of arrangement is what makes this deal go, as you'll see in a bit. Back to the article. Harbaugh's only face-to-face contact with a Giants rep at that point happened 3 days earlier at his home in Owings Mills, Maryland, with senior player personnel director Chris Mara, John's younger brother. Chris had assumed a larger role in the organization since John Mara announced in September that he had been diagnosed with cancer. Chris Mara and Harbaugh enjoyed a lunch of what the coach called the best chicken salad he could find in Baltimore. For 3 hours, they spoke about how the Giants ran their football operations and about the way Harbaugh ran the Ravens for 18 years before they fired him. It was an encouraging start to the process. Chris loved the chocolate chip cookies made by Harbaugh's wife Ingrid and took a few home with him. And now the most coveted free agent on the coaching market was bonding at 35,000 feet with Schoen, the relentless point man in a high-stakes recruiting battle the Giants couldn't afford to lose. Harbaugh had strong working relationships with his Baltimore general managers, Ozzie Newsome and Eric DaCosta. He could envision building one with Schoen, despite his 4-year record of 22, 45, and 1. That's 22 wins, 45 losses, and 1 tie. Now, this is interesting at this point because as I'm looking at this negotiation, if Harbaugh is meeting with these guys for 3 hours at his home, I'm thinking this negotiation has a very good chance of success right from the beginning because both sides are spending time to kind of become acquainted with and develop relationships with the other side. This is a cooperative negotiation. You have two cooperatives involved in a negotiation, which is the absolute best kind of negotiation you can have. When both sides are looking at a negotiation as a joint problem-solving exercise, that's where you want to be. Plus, chocolate chip cookies never hurt. And I'm saying that facetiously, but when you start doing things like doing people little favors, sending an airplane to get them, giving them home-baked chocolate chip cookies, that may sound like little stuff, like just kind of accoutrements, but it can go a long way in a relationship, in developing a business relationship. Back to the article. The all-day meetings at the facility with Tish, John and Chris Mara, Shane, executives and department heads, and quarterback Jackson Dart couldn't have gone better. The candidate made a national story out of a local restaurant, Elia Mediterranean, by dining there with Giants officials. There were handshakes and hugs all around at the end of a long but blissful day, and Harbaugh, the product of a prominent football family, felt like he was suddenly part of a new one. Elia Mediterranean. Okay, I'm a Jersey guy, still spend a fair amount of time in Jersey. Haven't been to Elia Mediterranean, but I can tell you something. If you take a business contact out to an Italian restaurant in northern New Jersey, you're sending a message that you like that person because, boy, some of that Italian food at these local family-owned restaurants in northern New Jersey, it is world class. So good for them to go to Elia Mediterranean, and good free advertising for Elia Mediterranean. Back to the article. The Super Bowl winning coach and the franchise that sure needed one verbally agreed to get married. The story got out a few hours after Hardball landed in Baltimore, broken and confirmed by New York and national reporters with established track records of accuracy. Contacted by The Athletic for an on-the-record notarization as the midnight hour approached, Harbaugh said he was deferring to the Giants for any announcement. Things went well, he texted. So well, in fact, that Harbaugh canceled his scheduled meeting with the Giants' most serious challenger for his services, the Tennessee Titans, at his home the following day. Now, this is interesting and good. You never want to waste people's time, right? You want to keep your options open, but if it looks like you're close to a deal with someone and you have an appointment scheduled with someone else, you might want to go through with that second meeting just to keep your options open. But here John Harbaugh makes a good decision. He doesn't want to waste anybody's time. And he knows time is valuable and that the Titans football team is looking for a head coach themselves. He doesn't want to take a chance of making them focus on him and possibly losing out on other coaches who are negotiating with other teams. So this is a good business choice. It shows respect for the Tennessee team. A good move by Harbaugh. Back to the article. In the tense Saturday hours before Harbaugh reached his 5-year agreement for $100 million plus lucrative bonuses, his agent, Brian Harlan, was still communicating with the Titans, who were still interested in hiring his clients. Harbaugh's done deal with the Giants was not done, and the Titans weren't the only NFL team ready to pounce if the unimaginable happened and the whole thing fell apart. Executives around the league wondered if the delay in finalizing the contract meant there was a problem brewing between the Giants and Harbaugh. Harlan wouldn't have been doing his job in protecting his clients if he didn't keep talking to the Titans, just as the Giants wouldn't have been protecting themselves if they didn't keep alternative candidates warm in the bullpen. Let me take a step back there. You know the concept from Getting to Yes of BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. When you're involved in negotiations, you always want to be thinking of your BATNA. If this deal doesn't work in the way we've structured it, what do we do next? What's our next alternative? So what I'm saying is you can be committed to getting a deal done, but always keep your options open, which is why you never want to burn bridges in business. If you leave a company, if you leave a business deal, never make it personal. No matter how mad you are at a former employer, act with class. Make sure that all company materials are returned to them. Never give them a hard time. You always want to keep your bridges open because you never know when you might have to go. It might be advantageous to you to go back in that direction. So when this article talks about how Harbaugh's agent is actively keeping options open, that's a guy who knows how to negotiate. He's worried about his BATNA. He's not just going to say, oh, well, looks like John's going to get a deal done with the Giants. No need to talk to these other people. You want to keep your options open and in the loop. Back to the article. As both sides worked in good faith, some vultures circled above. One NFL executive told Harlan that his team's owner was willing to hop on a plane the next day and make a 9-figure offer to Harbaugh if the Giants' negotiations went cold. And yet the Giants remained confident Harbaugh would ultimately sign with them. To ease the coach's concerns about the chain of command and operational structure, Chris Mara had secretly met with him on Friday at an undisclosed location between New York and Baltimore. Progress was made. But when asked at 9:17 that night if he was still feeling good about his prospects of becoming the Giants coach, the man who had New York as his number one potential destination through the entire process and who said he kept picturing himself in those iconic Giants colors responded with a shrug emoji. Okay, let me take a step away from that. Lesson 1, never negotiate in public, right? You don't need to tell the press or anyone in your organization or outside your organization who doesn't need to know how the negotiations are going. Because if you say something in public, it can come back to hurt you in the negotiation. And while these two sides are pushing toward a final agreement throughout this discussion, you never want to take the agreement for granted. I think as we said at the top of this podcast, bank in the bank, not in your head. So never let the other side think until it's absolutely necessary that you got the deal done. You want to make them work for it. And that's what John Harbaugh and his agent are doing here. Back to the article. Harbaugh needed it in writing that he would report to John Mara and not to Shane, a tact that ran counter to the way the Giants have conducted business. New York had historically been a GM, general manager, centric organization, even with tough guy coaches and two-time champions Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin. Harbaugh was pushing ownership to change to more of a coach-driven model, and it was taking time to get there. I think it's always a little nerve-wracking when you come down to the end of a tough negotiation, Chris Mara told The Athletic on Sunday. But I felt like I had a pretty good read on the connection that I had made with John. We shared the same vision and the same goal, so at the end of the day, it was all about let's put a structure together that we are comfortable with. So, reading between the lines there, they were in agreement on numbers and length fairly early. The problem was this, not the problem, but the sticking point that had to be worked out was this operational structure with Harbaugh reporting directly to the owner and basically going above the GM's head. That made some people at the Giants uncomfortable. But I think the way Harbaugh approached this was, look, this is what I'm used to. I've found this to be the most efficient, but I am going to work with the GM on a 50-50 basis. We're on the same team. And this is going to be a joint problem-solving exercise. And he sold that. He sold that vision to Giants ownership. Back to the article. Shane recused himself in the last couple of days of the chase as John Mara and Tisch deliberated with support from Chris Mara. This was never about money, which is a funny thing to say about a coach who just made a score a little north of $100 million. The Wednesday night news leaks had actually handed considerable leverage to the Harbaugh camp, which could have squeezed the Giants for even more cash. Harbaugh figured his client's contract would get hurdled in a few weeks if Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, those are two other well-respected coaches, signed contract extensions. The agent guessed that if he put Harbaugh up for bidding, he might have gotten 6 years at $25 million a pop. So, interesting. So it's clear that Harlan and Harbaugh could have played this out a little, been a little more patient, and basically gotten a bidding war done between several teams. But John Harbaugh really wanted to be with the Giants. That was important to him. And while he negotiated hard on the issues that mattered to him, he didn't want to create a rift where a rift didn't need to be created. So he wanted the Giants to know that he definitely wanted to be there. And while he had certain things that he absolutely needed in this negotiation, he didn't want to push them unreasonably. So what does that tell you? This is a cooperative negotiation. Just because it's a cooperative negotiation doesn't mean it's always going to be a smooth negotiation. They had to get this past this part about who Harbaugh would report to. But both sides at this point, throughout the negotiation, even though it's taking a little more time than people expected, they're in cooperative mode. At no point do I see in this description of the negotiation that one of the sides turned aggressive and tried to push the other side around. That doesn't seem to ever happen here. Back to the article, which talks about Harlan. That's John Harbaugh's agent. Harlan is a former Chicago Bears public relations executive and the son of a beloved longtime Green Bay Packers president. Flagship franchises meant a ton to him, and he preferred to place his client with the New York Giants. Harbaugh himself is an Ohio-born son of a coach and student of a league that launched in 1920 with 5 Ohio-based teams, including the Canton Bulldogs and the Columbus Panhandles. I love that name, the Columbus Panhandles. He understood league history and his prospective employer's place in it. His father, Jack Harbaugh, a high school and college football lifer, effectively told his older son he'd be nuts to sign with anyone other than the Giants. John agreed with his dad, and yet he needed to ensure that he could change the infrastructure of the franchise enough to make it a consistent winner like the one he helped build in Baltimore. This wasn't about Shane. The coach definitely feels he can work with the general manager. Harbaugh wanted the ability to impact the entire operation, from security to training to analytics to media relations to staff size to assistant salaries to relocation expenses to you name it. And yes, in the unlikely event there's a stalemate on draft day between Harbaugh and Shane, there's no question who will prevail. I think both sides needed to huddle up and make sure we were all on the same page at the end of the day, Chris Mara said. It took a little more give and take for both sides to come to an agreement. Take a step back there. There's no question that both sides are focused on getting an agreement done. And it doesn't seem like at any point during this discussion, anyone threatened anybody with saying something like, hey, look, if you're not willing to go sign this deal as we've structured it, there's a half dozen other coaches out there who would love to coach the Giants. It never got to that sort of obnoxious point. They had some stuff to work through, and they worked through it in a cooperative way. Back to the article. In fact, nothing was settled as late as Saturday morning. Harlan had the Titans on standby. One league source said, if things fell apart at 1 p.m, I would not have been surprised. To avoid angering the National Football League, the Giants wanted to make the announcement before the 4:30 p.m. ET kickoff of the Buffalo-Denver playoff game, assuming there would be an announcement. I believe in the long run, this agreement came down to a conversation between John and John, Chris Mara said, that being John Mara and John Harbaugh. See, this is another great thing, right? You could have a negotiating team. You could have a bunch of business associates or lawyers involved in a negotiation, and sometimes it's going to hit a sticking point, as I said, even if it's a cooperative negotiation. But what happens here? The two principals, John Mara of the Mara family and John Harbaugh, the coach he wants, sit down together and talk. You know what? John, to the other John, let's get everybody out of the room. Let's sit down, you and me. Let's just talk out the problem. Let's see if we can get this resolved. It's just a great move, right? Get the people who really matter into the room to sit down. By the way, we talked about the Zelensky-Putin negotiations recently on a podcast. And the reason that probably isn't going to go anywhere is because those two men are not going to sit down in the same room alone together with a feeling of trust in a cooperative negotiation and try to get something done. That's just not the tenor of that. They hate each other. But here you have two businessmen, very good at what they do, sit down and just hammer it out. Look, man, we're at the end game. We got a couple of things we need to hammer out. Let's sit down and get it done. And that's what they did. Back to the article. Like nearly everyone else in the National Football League, Harbaugh has immense respect for John Mara due to their work on competition committee issues. When the two sat down on Wednesday, Harbaugh was struck by Mara's courage and spirit. The owner is a lion of the league who somehow overcame his grueling cancer treatments to engage in this pursuit fully. When I saw him, he looked good and he was sharp. He was into it, Harbaugh told The Athletic. He's shown so much toughness with what he's fighting, going to the office every day. Now I feel like I'm in him with that fight and I'm praying for him every day. Beautiful. I mean, they're on the same page. They like each other personally. And you know what he says about, what the article says about Harbaugh knew John Mara through working together on the National Football League competition committee. When you develop a reputation for credibility and being a stand-up guy, it takes a lifetime to develop it. Now, it only takes about 10 minutes to blow it up. I mean, if you do something untrustworthy, there goes your reputation. But when you build your account by being a stand-up guy, by doing things that you said you were going to do because you said you were going to do them, regardless of the personal impact on you, and to be a guy who can be, his word is his bond, that can really help you in business and negotiation. You should always be cognizant of that. If you are untrustworthy, or you lie, or you do things contrary to what you said you were going to do, or you're late for meetings, or you do things that are just not something that a stand-up person would do, people are maybe forced into negotiating with you, but they'll get a deal done if they get a deal done despite you. That's not what you want. You want somebody who really wants to do business with you and who trusts you because you have credibility and ethics. And that's how John Mara came across to John Harbaugh. Back to the article. The Giants have been in the Mara family for more than 100 years, and it was never going to be easy to merge with the modern-day Harbaugh machine. This wasn't a hostile takeover or even a non-hostile takeover. This was a long overdue reboot for a franchise that hasn't done any meaningful winning since its fourth Super Bowl victory 14 years ago. John Mara, 71, came to agree with his 63-year-old brother to give the 63-year-old Harbaugh the tools he needs to make the Giants contenders again. Chris Mara handled the final round of negotiations with Harbaugh on Saturday afternoon and relayed the terms required to close the deal to his brother and Tish being the other owner. They all agreed to contact Harbaugh with the news that he was their new head coach. John Mara was the one chosen to make the call. That was the way it had to be. Harbaugh was asked by The Athletic at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday when he knew the deal was definitely getting done. About a half hour ago, he said. The coach wasn't kidding. He made the agreement official via DocuSign on Saturday night. It's been a whirlwind ever since. Harbaugh's agency, Excel Sports Management, is fielding offers for endorsements and appearances, including one from The Tonight Show. New York has its advantages, always and forever. The Giants and Harbaugh came together, overcoming the forces that were pulling them apart. It's a great article and just a great piece of reading. I left out a little bit of it, but listen, get The Athletic, man. Read some of these articles that they have in there about contract negotiations. It's just, it's great stuff, and it really gives you behind-the-scenes look at how these negotiations go. But what I want you to take away from this article is the beauty of a negotiation when you have a cooperative negotiator who's working with a cooperative negotiator. When you both want to get a deal done, you'll find a way. When you don't play games by using threats or talking to the media and disclosing terms publicly to try to create pressure on the other side, you'll get a deal done. It's a matter of trust. And so, as I said at the beginning, if you can get into a negotiation where you're a cooperative negotiator who's trying to do business with another cooperative negotiator, beautiful things can happen. Who knows if John Harbaugh will be a success with the Giants? I don't know. But the story of this contract negotiation is fascinating and it's illuminating. It shows what happens when you approach a negotiation as a joint problem-solving exercise. And folks, that's all I have for you today on the Station for Negotiation. So until next time, this is Gene Killian signing off and reminding you once again that negotiation is life. Hey, thanks for listening to the Station for Negotiation podcast. Until next time, you can keep up with us on social media at the following places. On X, formerly known as Twitter, it's at STN4 Negotiation. That's at STN4 Negotiation. On Facebook, you can hit us up at facebook.com/station4 negotiation pod. That's facebook.com/station4 negotiation pod. Over on Instagram, you can reach us at station4 negotiation. Again, that's at station4 negotiation. On LinkedIn, station4 negotiation podcast. Again, that's station4 negotiation podcast. Over on YouTube, we're at station4 negotiation. That's at station4 negotiation. If you want to shoot us an email, you can do that at station4 negotiationpod@gmail.com. That's station4 negotiationpod@gmail.com. So we'll see you next time on the Station for Negotiation podcast. And until then, remember, negotiation is life.